Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Moises Garcia. Today, I have the pleasure to present my speech, which is about transport of livestock by sea. For the introduction, we have the animals have been transported by sea as well as across lakes and rivers for centuries. The main reason for transporting animals by sea is to satisfy a commercially driven demand, which usually involves breeding, immediate slaughter, or feeding and subsequent slaughter. The need to transport animals occur essentially in commercial agriculture and to a lesser extent in the rural of subsistence sector. These animals need to be moved for a number of reasons, including marketing, slaughter, restocking from drought areas, to better grazing and change of ownership. Typically methods of transporting these animals are by road, by rail, on a ship, or by air. Generally, the majority of livestock in developing countries are moved by rail or by road. Livestock also has been moved by foot, but with the increasing of the humankind, they had to find new ways to improve the commercialization of animal production. That's why livestock has been transported by road and rail, and this has surpassed the expectations. Transport of livestock is undoubtedly the most stressful and injurious stage in the chain of operation between farm and slaughterhouse, and contributes significantly to poor animal welfare and loss of production. The guidelines for the sea transport of animals consist of articles which address the following areas: responsibilities, documentation, planning the journey, pre-journey period, journey, and refusal to import. When we're talking about responsibilities, we mean that once the decision to transport animals by sea has been made, the welfare of animals during their transport is paramount and is the joint responsibility of all people involved. The guidelines identify the main parties involved in the sea transport of animals and outline their responsibilities. The exporter is also responsible for ensuring the compliance of the animals with the veterinary certification and other requirements of the importing and exporting countries. The manager of the facilities that are used during the loading of the animals and unloading at the end of the journey has several responsibilities, including the provision of suitable premises and the provision of competent animal handlers. The exporting country and the importing country also have several responsibilities, including establishing minimum standards for animal welfare, approving facilities, setting the competence standards, ensuring that the vessel transporting the animals meets the required standards, and monitoring and evaluating the health and welfare performance. In the documentation, there is some information that should accompany the consignment, which is the journey travel plan, details of the loading and stocking of the animals, the daily record of inspection and important events during the journey, details of the animals and their identification, details of any treatments, as well as any death station. Planning the journey adequately is regarded as a key to a successful animal health and welfare outcome. The pre-journey period should address the following areas at a minimum: the type of vessel required, the journey route, including distance, expected weather and sea conditions, daily care and management of the animals, provisions of appropriate equipment and medication, provisions of feed and water, and emergency response. Planning the journey also includes provision of an emergency management plan that identifies the important events that may occur during the journey, the procedure of managing each event, and the action to be taken in an emergency. Any vehicle used for the transport of livestock should have adequate ventilation, have a non-slip floor with proper protection from the sun and rain, particularly for the peaks. The surfaces of the sides should be smooth and there should be no sharp edges. The lack of ventilation will cause stress and even suffocation, particularly if the weather is hot. Poor ventilation might cause accumulation of exhaust fumes in road vehicles with subsequent pollution. Non-slip floors in all vehicles are necessary to reduce the risk of animals falling. Animals require sufficient floor space so they can stand comfortably without being overcrowded. Overloading results in injuries or even death of the animals. Some of the animals that are being transported are the cattle, sheep or goats, pigs, and poultry. The most appropriate methods of moving cattle are on hoof, by road motor vehicle or by rail wagon. Moving cattle on the hoof is suitable only where road and rail infrastructure does not exist, or when the distance to the destination is short. This method is slow and fraught with risk to the welfare and value of the animals. Now I'm gonna show you a video that happened in 2018 that almost 2,000 sheep died by heat stress.
Okay, there are three things that we need to understand about this footage. The first is that this is the normal experience for sheep being exported from Australia to the Middle East. The second is that the mortality rates on these voyages, the numbers of sheep that have died, are all deemed acceptable by the Australian government, except for one voyage that triggered an investigation. So it's considered acceptable if less than 2% of sheep die on a voyage. That is normal practice. And the third thing is that what we're seeing are sheep that are loaded in accordance with the Australian standards for the export of livestock. These are the standards that the industry describes as world's best practice. We're seeing animals that are crammed into pens so tightly that they're unable to move. We're seeing sheep that are dying and left to die without any veterinary attention. We're seeing sheep that are suffering so badly from heat stress that they simply can't function anymore. And we know from reports of these voyages, we know that those sheep will just die where they are in the pens. The Australian public until now has not known, and this footage makes it quite clear that the way in which sheep are exported from Australia is completely unacceptable.
Well, thank you for your attention. I hope you like my speech. No.